LaTanya, did you know it's possible to have a successful marriage even in ministry?
Did you know that if you don't have balance in ministry, sometimes it can affect the marriage?
I do. It can lead to divorce. And on today's show, we'll talk about marriage, ministry, and divorce. And hopefully we help someone to save their marriage.
Welcome back to In the Know. Today we have a very sensitive topic today as we talk about marriage, ministry, and divorce, a topic that many don't want to talk about and perhaps you yourself are experiencing. I want to welcome back with me my co-host, Murphy Henry. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Always good to join you on the set and to talk about topics that some people think are taboo, if you will, things that sometimes the church doesn't want to talk about, and definitely marriage, ministry, and unfortunately divorce is a topic that the church doesn't too much talk about, even though we experience it.
Yeah, and you know the thing about that is it's one of those things that people don't believe happens.
Right.
And it happens because it happened to me. And a lot of times in marriage or in ministry and those type of things, one of the facades and images that we see is that every marriage in church is perfect.
Yes.
Every marriage is good and all of these things. And it causes people that do struggle not to know how to handle the struggles. Exactly,
because again, like you said, a lot of times we have to put the mask on and the Sunday morning mask and go to church and pretend as if everything's together. I recently talked about, just shared briefly, it wasn't anything major, but I just shared briefly how one Sunday morning my husband and I had a little bathroom encounter. It's like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And you get to church and you just go about your business. And so for us, we have that conflict resolution, but many couples don't.
Right.
Many couples carry the bathroom over and it just escalates and it goes on and nobody knows, because you get to church and you have your mask on and you go to your various ministries and you just keep going when in essence, there are issues.
Most definitely. And a lot of times the issues aren't resolved. So whenever you're in church or whenever you're worshiping everything, it's all fine and dandy. But once you leave the church, those same issues are still right there waiting for you. And a lot of times we don't know how to handle those issues when they come about.
Exactly. You know, I want to back up a little bit because I was just thinking that today we're calling it marriage, ministry, and divorce.
Yeah.
And one of the key things is the first thing that as we're the topic of our conversation is marriage, ministry, and divorce. And I just began to think briefly that sometimes we do ministry, marriage, and then the divorce. And sometimes we tend to get those things out of order. And we don't follow the sequence that, even though it's like, oh yeah, I love the Lord, but we tend to put things out of sequential order or bring things out of order, take things out of order than how God intended. And so the end result is sometimes the divorce, when we're just putting ministry before the marriage and not understanding actually what ministries, what the symbolism of marriage in the first place. And so we tend to do all ministry, and then we'll come and check on the marriage, and it ends in divorce.
And that's and for me, for those that don't know that are watching, I am divorced. And a lot of it was due to lack of taking care of the marriage. And there was a point and a time where ministry was the most important thing to me, because I was taught that you do God's work first, not understanding that God's business is your marriage first.
Exactly.
If that makes any kind of sense. So what happened was, there were times when I was recently sharing with someone, there were times when I should have been taking or nursing my marriage. I was too busy doing ministry. One instance was, I can remember, it was around our anniversary time and we had decided we were going to take a weekend away. But my pastor at the time said, no, we need you here. So instead of saying, no, I need to care for my marriage,
Right.
I ended up, we ended up staying at the church. And eventually there came a point where she ended up being upset and frustrated because it's like, you're putting church before us.
Exactly.
So, later on down the line, it led to other things. But I'm saying that to say that if there's no balance, if there's no consistency in both, and there's no understanding, that there's going to be conflict, and then eventually lead to the latter we talked about, the divorce.
The divorce. I was recently reading something from Focus on the Family, and that's just what they do. They focus on the family. Yeah. And one of the things, because a lot of people think, oh, the divorce rate amongst believers is skyrocketing, and it is. But one of the things that they noted was, for those who say they believe and they're both believers, one of the things that they noted is that when both are committed to the ministry and they actually worship together and pray together, the divorce rate actually is not as high. And so, as if you're married and you're in ministry, or just believers, we use in ministry a lot because we're both actually a minister of the gospel. But you're believers, you need to really pray together, and you do need to commit together. And even in that, we need to check. I'm a firm believer in checking schedules as well. Does our lifestyle permit that? And I do believe as well that there are adjustments that need to be made. Because sometimes we tend, I have softball and I have soccer and I have, all these things, but we also are called to worship, and we're called to give back to our communities. And we really have to find that place where, how does this thing look? What does it look like to God? And what does really God say about it? And find that place where we're all worshiping and we're all giving back and we're all, participating together. Yes, what I have committed to may call a couple of hours away, but there needs to be some balance, and there needs to be some checks and balances, because we're so busy. I have this meeting and that meeting, and this group is going out, and this is our fellowship night, that I tend to forget about my marriage.
And what happens is, a lot of times I've seen it in my own life where the marriage is put on the back burner, and it begins to suffer because you feel like everything else is more important. And along the lines, you said the schedule and stuff like that, and you begin to miss each other. You begin to only see each other on a brief moment and stuff like that. And we begin to think that's the way life is supposed to be. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
And before you know it, everything else has taken precedence over your marriage, over your home, and everything else is more important. And what happened in my case, as you were talking, I was thinking back to, there was a time where I would get up in the morning and I would pray over my wife, pray over the home, and so forth and so on. And then there came a time where things got chaotic for us, and the focus shifted.
Right.
And when the focus shifted, everything else began to shift as well. So I wasn't praying over her her mother died, and I didn't understand that part, and about death, and so many different other things began to happen. And when I began to, my responsibility as the man of God in the house began to shift, and I wasn't focusing on, because I didn't understand her.
Exactly.
And all kind of other things. So I busied myself doing other things instead of trying to nurture what was going on.
That's good, because things arise, and we can be so busy that we don't know how to relate to our spouse, because we're understanding everything else, and we're reading our manuals, and we're getting to know everything else and the structure of everything else, and we've lost to our communication and how to relate to our spouse, and even so busy doing other things, we don't even realize sometimes where our mate started shifting and changing. And that's very important as well. And we stop focusing on, wait a minute, something shifted, because there's so much noise around us that you don't hear the silence of your spouse. And that's very important. I want to, even in that, before it gets to that, what are the things, and I just want to encourage, those that are married and say, hey, that's me. You have to go back to say, why did I get married in the first place? What are the things about my spouse? What are the things that I enjoyed about my relationship initially? And you have to purpose not to lose that. You have to purpose not to get away from those things that, that you find in common, those common grounds, the fun that you had. And, again, do you have to arrange some things? We have kids. We got married, didn't have any kids, and life changes, but you have to still make time to spend that time with your spouse, to spend the time and do the things that brought you together in the first place. Activities do change and people do grow. You know, you say, well, I met mine in the club.
Right, right, right.
And you may not do that anymore. But, you know, you have those times together, and just to remind yourself what I like about my spouse. In the first time, it was one Sunday, actually recently, and I walked in and I told myself, oh my God, you look good. I think I might have shared that with you. I said, you look so good. He didn't hear me. And so another brother said, what did you say? She said, you look good.
Right,
and
yeah,
she said, you look good. And so here we are years later, I'm still reminding him, man, whoo, you look good. You look great. And that's important as well. And we tend to lose that. It's like, oh, take for granted that your spouse still, knows that you still think that they're attractive. And these are just the things that the enemy will try to ease in, and it will cause it can create a wedge. So these are just little things that we have to remember.
I have a saying now, and I learned it in the process. It's in the silence, it's in the quiet time that the enemy speaks the loudest. When no one's communicating, when no one's speaking, that's when the enemy speaks the loudest. Because we have a tendency in marriage, one will go in one room and the other may go in the living room or wherever, and there's no communication, there's no way, and neither one is trying to give and trying to fix the situation, if that makes sense, to where was like, okay, this has been going on long enough, so let's mend it, let's start talking, even if it's argument, the enemy can't, because you're communicating.
Exactly.
It may not be the best way to communicate, but at least you're communicating now, and it keeps the enemy out of it. And with that, back to the ignoring part, when things change, I'm reminded of, instead of trying to work on the problem, that's the very thing we do. I found myself doing other things while she had the issue, or it could be vice versa, because I didn't know how to handle the issue. I found myself woodworking, doing all these things and doing other things, because just hoping that it would fix itself.
Exactly.
And it never fixed itself. It never fixed itself in different instances. And it happened when my sister died, and the support, all of these different things that wasn't there. So it's kind of like you think, well, time is just gonna fix it. Time doesn't always fix these issues.
Exactly.
Communication does, understanding does, but a lot of times we don't know how to not only communicate, but know how to deal with it. So we just let it fester into something
something else.
Yeah,
God never intended.
Right.
Exactly. And so it could get so old. One of the things, when you said the word fester, just like there's some things, it's like, it's gotten so bad, we got to amputate it.
Yeah.
And you're beginning to cut things off. That could have been savaged, that could have been saved had you given attention to it. And just like even going to the doctors, our bodies speak. And they're giving off, our bodies are giving off signals to say, hey, something's not right, regardless of what it is. And we can wait so long until now, the next course of action has to be taken. But had we listened to one another, had we listened, it's amazing that we can feel each other's heartbeats per se. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what does that mean? And so we used to take cues. It's like, I know your body language. And we really have to pay attention when we stop watching the body language, when we stop paying attention and taking those cues, and you don't want things to get so far off that it's like, now it's time to cut this off. It's time to cut this off, and you're learning to do life without the vital parts. And that's dangerous. That can be very dangerous. It's like you're learning to do life without the part that you really need. And so you need that time. You need that quality time. You're like, oh, that's not my love language. You still need that quality time, and it's great to know each other's love language, but you need that quality time. You do need that physical touch. All of these things make up our relationship, and you definitely don't want those things cut off. It may not be your go-to, but you need all of those pieces, and they're vital to relationship.
Most definitely, because, and one of the most important things is having the relationship with God.
Yes.
I can recall myself preaching and prophesying, doing all these things, but looking out in the audience and not seeing my spouse there. And it can make you feel some type of way. The crowd can be, raised and lifted. They can be blessed. But as a preacher and as a minister, to not have the support of your loved one, it's very difficult because it's like, okay, God, I'm doing all this for you, but at the same time, there's a part of me missing. There's a part of me that I can recall her being there, and I preach harder. I do more. But in that, it's like, okay, I'm missing something. And even just being in a worship setting, and you see couples together with their holding hands, lifted hand with the other hand lift, whatever, praying for each other, praying with each other, and you're like, God, I'm married, but my like you said, the vital part is missing. So what happens is you begin to withdraw because it's one of those things of God, this is not the way you made it to be. And you go home, or even you get in your car and you're hurting because it's like something's missing.
Exactly.
And even along the lines of, you said, like when talking about the body, when your body gives a signal, we have a tendency to go get it checked, or we should go get it checked. Some people ignore, but we should get it checked. And it's the same way in the atmosphere of the home. When the atmosphere is off, instead of us checking it, we just, oh, she's just acting up today. Oh, he's just acting crazy. Not knowing that it could be something that caused them to act that way, and a lot of times we just ignore it, and before you know it, it's worse than when you start.
Exactly. You're talking about having that support of that spouse is very important. It's very crucial. I want to encourage someone, because you said, well, you know what? I'm not in ministry. I am totally taking, 4-H is my thing. It's like, I am not a preacher. I'm not any of those things. And perhaps it's a club of some sort or anything. I mean, I don't want you to be, well, I'm not in ministry, but 4-H, different clubs, various things have taken up your time. Don't be so inundated with what you're doing that you fail to minister in your home, male or female, wife or husband. Don't be so inundated and engrossed with everything else that you fail to keep up with the activities and the people that you really are called to do life with, and that's your spouse, and perhaps your children if you have children. If you don't, your pets. But they're a part of the home, and they make up just a happy life and a happy home. And I just want to encourage, because one of the things, and you said, well, I am in ministry, or I am the vice president or whatever in a particular group, invite your spouse in. That's very important.
Yes, most
to
definitely.
Invite your spouse. Oh, my spouse isn't into that, and I've talked to wives a lot, and they can't tell you what their husbands do. Absolutely no clue. And that may not be your thing, but just sit there sometimes. That's important. Like you said, the support. If I just sit there or I ask a question or two, these are things that the enemy just doesn't want us to know or to do. I may not be into golf, but somehow, some way, I tease all the time. I don't know anything about football, but ESPN is this thing, and by default, I know football news because I'm a listener. So that way, I can meet him halfway with those things. It's like, oh, that's not important. Yes, that's important. When FSU got a new coach, I'm like, hey, what's up? He's like, oh man, he was so excited that I knew that FSU, Florida State, had gotten a new coach. Do I really care? Absolutely not. But he cares. But he cares. And so I'm meeting him halfway, and it may sound silly, but I'm there with you. I'm there with you. That's that support piece that we tend to miss, and we tend to get so spiritual. Oh, I'm in ministry. No, I don't. We tend to get so deep, and we miss it that all of a sudden it's like, man, they're not interested in anything I'm interested in. They never want to come to a game, or anything. They never want to support in what I'm doing. And I know we're saying ministry, marriage, and divorce, but it could be any activity that we're so inundated with it that we miss our spouse. And where's that spouse? And it's very important to have that spouse support.
Absolutely. And the thing, but like you said, it's about the quality time.
Yes.
It's not even, they could be on their phone doing their own thing or whatever, just sitting there, and and then the questions may come like, okay, why did you do this? Or why was this? Or even, like you said, watching ESPN or whatever, even though most women, that's not their thing. But then, they could ask questions, hey, why did you, or why did they do this, or whatever the case. And it'll just be a conversation piece, just to know that the interest is there, because if there's no interest, then there's a greater divide.
Yes.
Even if you're just there, if not, it's a greater divide that can take place because for me, her, the interest may not have been per se ministry because she wasn't a preacher. But sharing the word and just, okay, this is what it looks like and stuff like that, because there comes a point where you can get a disconnect. And in that disconnect, you don't want to share anything. And even though it could be a very small communication piece, it keeps communication flowing. And you never know, and this, hopefully this is not off topic too much, but you never know, God may give them something in either way, even if it's just on the regular job or in business or whatever, that could help enhance the business or make things easier.
Exactly. You know, you talked about that communication part, and it is very key. It's vital. You know, I want to just too. How do you know that your spouse? One of the ways to know, it just came to me. One of the ways to know that your spouse, there's becoming a divide, and one of the things that has dropped in my spirit is your spouse doing, you know, having supplement activities.
Yeah.
Because, you know, our time has to be occupied. And so all of a sudden you find your spouse is taking up a particular activity because they're looking for something really to do and filling that time and filling that void with other activities. You talked about, for example, woodworking. If your spouse is so inundated with what they're doing, and for some people it's their work, for a lot of people it's ministry. This is ministry, marriage, and divorce. And so it's like, you know what? You're so inundated with that, I'm going to find something else to do. And you find yourself with a new set of friends, and all of a sudden it's like, well, who is so-and-so? Oh, I met them at the club, or I met them, you know, playing tennis or whatever. I worked with a woman many years ago, and I think I shared this before, was actually divorced because husband was married to the motorcycle club.
Yeah.
That was his ministry. Yeah. She said he doesn't have a girlfriend. I'm confident of it. The girlfriend is the bike. And we have to really watch those things, because now you're spending more time with other activities than the one that God actually intended for us to minister to, and that's your spouse. And so it's very, very, very important. One of the things to come together with the calendar, as I do, you know, it's something that called Symbis, and I just want to throw that out there, not for advertising purposes, but it's called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. And it's awesome because whether you're thinking about getting married or you're already married, my husband and I actually took the Symbis assessment, and it was like, oh wow, we have to have a conversation. And even though it's called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts, we've been married for years, but we need to have a conversation because some of these answers aren't matching. And after so many years, is it still important to revisit that? What do we do, even though we're married? How do we go back, and the answers that really don't match, that really need to match? What do we do about that? And let's have this conversation. And those conversations are definitely key to possibly saving your marriage.
Oh, yeah, because if it's finding a common ground, because you're not going to agree on everything.
No.
Your personalities won't on every level won't be the same. And a lot of times, like you said, over time things change, and people change, and mentalities change, and all of these things. So what you liked at one point in your life, you may not like at another stage in your life, or what you needed at one stage in your life, you may not need at this stage in your life. So it's good it's kind of like checks and balances.
Yes.
To where, okay, now in this stage, going back to the love languages, I did the test probably about 2 or 3 months ago, and it changed for me because now it's acts of service. No, I'm sorry, it's quality time and affirmation, words of affirmation are my two strongest. So, and with that, it says that now for me, just the time of sitting and talking and all of these things, but over time, when you're younger, you may like one thing, and as you get older, you may like something else, because with time, people change.
Yes.
And we have to realize that experiences make you change. Situations make you change, or make a person change. And if we don't realize that situations that they're changing, and we don't know how to adjust to the change, and we still treat them the same as we did before, you're going to have we have a problem, and there's going to be a problem in the marriage.
Exactly.
So it's about, like you said, about knowing the change, doing the tests, doing the things that need to be done in those regards.
Exactly. Very important to and allow your spouse to change.
Yeah.
Allow your spouse to grow and evolve. To say this is the need is change, and it can be for several reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, just aging. It can be for so many reasons that
Body's
those things
changing.
change. Your bodies are changing. You're aging. Your time. Just life changes. It's like, you know, I've learned to do that myself now, or, you know, I prefer physical touch. And I've seen people, and I'm going to tell you, you better know, you know, that your hearts are knitted, because there are people that divorce, someone gets sick,
Yes.
If someone gets sick, and then the physical touch is important. Those words of affirmation are important. I remember years ago, my cousin said, when do you stop complimenting? I said, you never stop complimenting. Our bodies are changing. I still want to know, do I have it? I still need to say, dude, Lord.
Right. Even if it's
and
just
put
a
a shimmer
quick,
with, oh my gosh, that's you right there. Stay right there. And those things are important because it's like, man, where did the fire go? Yeah. Where did the fire go? And so it's our job to keep that going. It's our job to come back and to bring those balances back. Especially, I'm a woman in ministry, and people tend to think, oh, you're preaching all the time, or you're strong. You're just strong-willed. For those who really know me, they know I am one that caters. The mic's off, the lights are off. I'm in wife mode. And so that's important to know that, and man, I had to pause right there because a lot of women just, oh, he's a sinner. He's not, he's not worshiping with me. He doesn't want to come to my church. Remain prayerful in that. That's very important, to remain prayerful in that. You said, well, my spouse doesn't like my church, or he doesn't want to come. I'm a woman. I participate. I love where I fellowship. Remain prayerful, but do not neglect who you are as a wife. It's still very important to minister to your husband. You married him, minister to him how God intended for you and according to the word of the Lord, and take care of your home. Yeah.
And I think along those lines, I think one of the dangers of ministry, being a preacher, period, and marriage at home, is sometimes we beat our spouse up with the word.
Yes.
A lot of times we beat people up with the word, and we're running out of time, so I'm not gonna get into too much of it right now. But we beat our spouse up with the word. We say, you can't handle my anointing, or you all of these crazy things that the man. Let me help somebody right here, men and women. When you come in the doors, we on either side are not looking for the preacher.
No.
We're looking for the husband, or we're looking for the wife.
Exactly.
We're not looking for a tongue talk. If you want to pray in the middle of the night, whatever, that's fine. But what about the meal being cooked? What about these bills? What about the kids? What about all these things that need to be taken care of? And a lot of times we don't understand the balance. We're trying to pray when the person just wants to talk. He wants to watch a movie. We don't always, I'm gonna say we as a whole, we don't always want to talk about the word. Might want to watch ESPN.
Exactly.
Might want to watch a movie. Might want to cuddle. Whatever the case may be, let's go for a walk and let's just enjoy. But we're so heavenly minded sometimes we miss the moment to spend with our spouse.
Exactly, and it's very important. One of the things that we are running out of time, and we'll take it again. But exactly, yes to what you said. After that moment is over and fellowship is over, I just want to spend that time, and that's very important. And that's something that I refuse to lose and let go of.
Amen. So, and I'm gonna say this as we're closing: if your marriage is in any kind of shape, spend time with your spouse. Reevaluate the situation and know that God is able to heal the situation. Now, LaTanya, once again,
they're in the know.